All right, let's talk a bit about PRCH Group, about what I expect for Q4 and what I want to see going forward here into 2026. We will also take a quick look at insider transactions, and this is due to the news drought here. Basically, I'm gonna show you real quick. We saw upcoming attendance at investor events. I covered this. And then we have an AI summary here from Simply Wall Street. Nothing on investor relations, by the way. And then we have Pipedrive appoints Reggie Evangel as CFO. So a completely different company. But with all of these AI things, I see a lot of articles being posted as news under one company, and the article relates to another company. It's just an era where it's more and more confusing to be an investor, and we have to make sense of these things together. And then another AI summary here about growth stocks that insiders are confident in, and this is due to the CEO Matt Ehrlichman having a substantial holding, roughly 20% of the entire company. All right, so very volatile year to date. We saw the stock being about $10 here on the 9th, and then today, as I'm recording this on the 19th, it's trading at $8.48. So this is before market opening. So very, very volatile. Still a small cap stock, just $1 billion company, very small company still. It needs to 5x before it even becomes an acquisition target at current level. Nobody's gonna look at this. Very few analysts, very few other companies. And they are working on getting awareness up there. They are attending these investor days, these non-deal roadshows to get awareness up, to get more analysts to cover the stock, but still a tiny fish in this case. So Q4 earnings are also coming up, and historically Q4 has been the strongest quarter for PRCH Group. They've had great profits, good margins, and shown some nice growth as well here. We saw 6.19% year-over-year revenue growth for Q3, so that's quite slow. It was off quarter, so it's going to be interesting to see performance here for Q4, the historically strongest quarter. But once again, past performance is no guarantee for future results. We saw Lemonade just crossing over 3 million customers in total here, talking a bit about that, and it bodes well for the sector overall with these different insurance products. Premiums are rising, and a lot of these smaller competitors to the large names are getting growth. They are taking market share. It will be interesting to hear about growth plans to launch in new states, if they have launched in more states since Q3, and how they are doing with onboarding new agencies to sell this insurance product. This is one of the growth levers that I want to see be pulled in 2026. I want them to increase growth, increase profitability, and grow into their valuations, and perhaps even surprise analysts in terms of growth and profitability. That would be a nice outcome for 2026 indeed. Q1, Q2, historically there has been some bad weather events, catastrophic weather events, CAT as they say in the earnings calls, although this is no longer an issue due to the reciprocal exchange being up there in place. And I don't really know what to expect for Q1 and Q2 as a result of this, with more stability from being reinsured. How am I supposed to interpret the numbers compared to the old numbers when I do my comparison, it's going to be more apples to oranges. It could potentially hurt profitability if we see a lot of catastrophic weather events where, all right, we need to make claims. Although if something really, really bad happens and then they're gonna hit that cap in terms of how much they pay out themselves, and the reinsurance is gonna take the rest of that hit. So it's safer revenue, it's easier to predict, and perhaps this safety warrants a higher price to earnings multiple going forward. The market certainly thinks so right now. We see a price to earnings of 28. This was increased a bit due to last quarter's performance. It was a bit lower in the past before we had some negative earnings in Q3. But once again, Q4 historically the strongest quarter. It will be interesting to see how the multiple changes after that. And then once again we have Q3, Q4. Historically that has been very, very strong. Although now with reinsurance, perhaps we might see less volatility going forward for this company. I think it's very unlikely. I think it's still going to be huge swings on earnings dates. I think that's most likely. That's how it's been in the past. There's been a few, extremely few quarters where they have just gone sideways and nothing happens on the earnings. But that was, 2 or 3 times. All the other times we saw big volatility. So I still expect big volatility for PRCH Group going forward. And that's the name of the game with small cap stocks. All right, so that's some basic expectations in line for 2026. As I mentioned, wishing to see the growth levers being pulled with more states, more growth, more agencies being onboarded. Remember, we saw a new person being hired to the company to do the onboarding of agencies. I would like to hear some comments regarding how that work has gone in the earnings calls to come as well. Will be interesting to see how that one is going. And then also with regards to the software segment of the company, it would be interesting to hear management's take on some potential bullish events with regards to the software segment. For example, if people were allowed to take their mortgage with them, lock in the rate and have that as they sell and buy a new home. Perhaps that could be a bullish trigger leading to more movement in the housing market, more people moving around, and of course then we need the home inspection before moving in, and that's where PRCH Group comes in with the software. So just more usage there, more data for the company. So just a thawing of the housing market. If they see that on the agenda for 2026, didn't really see that in 2024. There was some slight chances for it in 2025, although very unlikely. But now it seems like rates are coming down here. We saw some interest rate cuts recently, likely to continue in 2026, and perhaps with the new head of the Federal Reserve, if Jerome Powell, he's going to retire, he gets switched out, who's going to take over? It will likely be a person that's more dovish, perhaps accelerates these rate cuts, if we're to believe the orange man in charge in America. Well, how does management see that, potential rate cuts could also affect the movement in the housing market? Because the software segment has been going sideways for some time and becoming a smaller and smaller part of total revenues, of total profits. And it would be nice to see a re-acceleration in this case. So a lot of speculation, a lot of uncertainty around the company still going into 2026. And that's the name of the game. You know, as investors, we get compensated for taking on risk if the risk does not materialize and we see positive performance instead. And speaking of being rewarded, let's take a quick look here at some of the latest transactions. So we see PRCH. So these are some automatic sells here where you put into the system. It could be Morgan Stanley at work, something like that, that manages the vesting of shares for executives and in some cases employees. You say, all right, I want to automatically sell these shares as they vest. And we see here 24,000 shares sold at $9. We see another one, 10,000 shares at almost $10. And just the compensation here, you know, 25,000, you know, times 10. This is 100K, almost 250K. These are nice bonuses for executives, and one of the reasons why management and executive earns a lot more than us average workers, us, you know, most of us retail investors, we're just doing some entry level, so mid-sized positions, something like this. But at the executive levels, they have this compensation. So we see a lot of automatic selling, for example, from the director here, 40,000 shares at $18, massive compensation. And this has been a trend for the company. You can see the dates here as well. Automatic sell at $9, at $7, $6, $5. They just sell. It doesn't really matter what the price is, as you can see here from earlier data in 2024. Sean Tabak here in this case sold at $3, $4, $2. So it doesn't really matter what the stock price is. They just sell to get that compensation. Although, point of interest, we don't see any transactions from the CEO, Matt Ehrlichman, not selling any of those shares that he holds. So some strong belief in the company indeed, and why shouldn't he? He has worked at another company that he sold before and now running here for PRCH Group. I think it's likely that eventually this company will be bought up as well, but only once they get closer to $5 billion in market cap, as I said in the beginning of the video. Still too small to even be considered for M&A activity. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I had to talk a little bit about expectations, you know, Q4, what's going on historically, talk a bit about insider transactions. It's like this with investing. There's not a whole lot of news to cover. I can't just, you know, make a video every week on a stock when it's not covered by a lot of analysts. It's not covered by a lot of, you know, news organizations other than AI summaries. And you know, we just have to wait for the quarterly earnings, listen in. That's when we get, you know, the huge news, the big news, when there's a lot to talk about. And I look forward to Q4 earnings, and I'm gonna make sure to make a video as soon as possible once the earnings is out. But you know, for now I do my best to talk a bit about my expectations and, you know, cover something, you know, statistics with regards to the stock. And just doing my best to keep you guys updated. Me having about 50,000 shares in this company, of course, you know, I stay updated and I check these things. I keep looking from time to time. Are there any news? Are there any major insiders selling? But just news drought. So, you know, I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. And as always, I hope you guys make a ton of money, whatever investments you decide to make. Take care now. Bye bye.